Get her out of my restaurant. People like her don't belong at a table like this. She's staff. She eats with staff." The woman in the apron looked up from the spill she was cleaning. Her voice stayed level. "I work here, sir. I was asked to assist your table." Langford's hand rose like he was flagging a cab. "I don't care what you were asked. You're embarrassing my guests. Leave the cloth. Someone else will handle it." She set the cloth down. She did not argue. She did not flinch. A man at the far end of the table, someone Langford had never paid attention to, watched the whole thing without touching his wine glass. He said nothing. He was very good at saying nothing. He had been practicing for 4 months. The next morning, Drew Langford got a phone call he was not ready for. The voice on the other end told him the investor meeting had been moved. New location. New chair at the head of the table. He asked who called the change. The answer came back, quiet and final. The new majority owner of Cecile Group. You'll know her when you see her. He saw her at 9 o'clock sharp. She was already seated. She was wearing the same calm she'd worn the night before, and she looked at him the way deep water looks at a stone dropping into it. "Good morning, Mr. Langford. Please sit. We have a great deal to discuss." The folder he'd brought in, the one with his own compensation package inside, was still in his hand when the room stopped belonging to him. 4 months earlier, 6:15 in the morning, the Cecile Group headquarters in downtown Vancouver rose 42 floors above Burrard Street, its glass catching the first gray light off the water. The lobby smelled of floor wax and recycled air. At that hour, the building belonged to the people who kept it running. Cecile Okafor arrived at 6:12, the same as always, transit pass still in her coat pocket, a thermos in one hand, a tote bag in the other. She signed in with the overnight guard, a man named Frank who always asked about her daughter's skating, and took the service elevator to the maintenance office on the 2nd floor. She was 44 years old. She had the kind of face that held its expression until it decided what it wanted to do. Her hair was pulled back. Her shoes were practical. Nothing about her announced anything. In the maintenance office, she pulled on her uniform top, poured the first half of the thermos into a mug she kept on a hook above the locker, and looked at the shift schedule pinned to the wall. Floors 2 through 8, lobby assist, the atrium corridor near the revolving doors. Routine. She had been working this building for 3 months, 11 days. She carried a mop the way her father used to carry a fishing rod, loose and unhurried, like the thing in her hands already knew what it needed to do. She had watched him fish without ever looking anxious about catching anything. She understood that now more than she had as a child. Some things reward patience so quietly you almost miss the moment they arrive. By 7, the building had started to breathe. Cecile knew which elevator was slowest on Monday mornings. She knew the woman in the 7th floor accounting office who kept a photo of a golden retriever on her monitor and talked to it when she thought no one was listening. She knew the courier who always stopped to hold the door for her, and she knew the 3 people who had never once looked at her at all in 3 months and a half. Drew Langford was one of them. He was the kind of man who cut across freshly mopped floors without reading signs. Not out of malice, necessarily. Simply because the floor was between him and where he wanted to be, and the floor was not the kind of thing he spent energy noticing. Cecile had watched him drop a coffee sleeve near the recycling bin twice. Not in it, near it. The second time she had been 6 feet away with a bucket. He had not looked up. That week, the Cecile Group was buzzing about its autumn gala. Langford had hosted it every year for a decade. He called it the Cecile Founders' Dinner, though the founders he was referring to were mostly Hel Dimmelf and 2 college friends who had since sold their shares and moved to Portugal. It was held at Margot, the private dining room above a heritage building in Gastown, and it served the 40 most powerful contacts in Langford's address book. Officially, it was a donor cultivation event for 3 local charities. Unofficially, it was a demonstration. Power, arranged beautifully on white linen, performing its own reflection. The service staff sheet went up on a Wednesday. Extra hands needed for the Cecile dinner. Good pay, long night, formal dress code for back of house. Cecile read the sheet for a moment, then wrote her name near the bottom. The floor supervisor, a woman named Priya, who had known Cecile for 6 weeks without knowing much about her, paused when she saw it. "You sure?" she said. "Langford gets particular at that one." Cecile capped the pen. "I'd like to see particular up close," she said. The dinner was held on a Thursday in late October. The Heritage Building glowed in the fog, its brick lit from below, ferns and candles arranged along the windowsills. Inside Margot's, the tables were set in a horseshoe around a low stage where Langford would stand later to introduce the charity presentations. A string trio played near the bar. The guests arrived in coats that cost more than most people's rent checks, and the room filled slowly with the particular sound of people who have nothing to prove proving it anyway. Cecile worked the floor corridor and the service pass-through between the kitchen and the main room. Her job was straightforward. Keep the pass-through clear. Assist the catering team with replenishment. Monitor the corridor for spills, glass, anything that needed to disappear before anyone noticed it. She had done this kind of work before. Not this work, exactly, but the version of it where you move through a room that is not meant to see you, and you watch, and you learn things that would never appear in any report. The first 2 hours passed without incident. The appetizers went out. The wine was poured. Langford worked the room with the ease of a man for whom working a room had become indistinguishable from breathing. He shook hands. He laughed at the right intervals. He touched men on the arm and women on the shoulder and moved on before the touch had time to become anything. At the table nearest the pass-through, a woman in a deep red gown was describing her new project to the man beside her in the careful way people describe things they are not entirely sure about yet. The man beside her, older, white-haired, kept nodding in the slow way that meant he was listening to something she could not hear yet. His name was Bernard Ossie, and he had been on the Sable board for 7 years. He did not speak much at these events. He sat and watched and wrote nothing down and forgot nothing. At 9:15, Langford took the small stage for the charity portion of the evening. His remarks were polished to the point of transparency. He talked about community. He talked about giving back. He talked about the privilege of success and the responsibility it carried. He named 3 charities and their directors, who were seated near the window and who clapped at the appropriate moments. He mentioned a total pledge of $180,000, and the room applauded the number. Behind the pass-through door, Cecile restocked a tray of water glasses and listened to a man describe generosity he had outsourced to a communications firm. The auctions began after the remarks. A weekend at a fly-in lodge in northern BC. A case of single malt from a Langford-adjacent distillery. A private dinner for 8 at a restaurant owned by a friend of Langford's. The paddles went up with the ease of people spending money that represented, to them, approximately the cost of an inconvenience. Then the evening shifted. It was small, the way the things that unmake nights usually are. A server named Owen, 19 years old, working his 3rd event, came through the pass-through too fast with a tray of dessert plates and caught the edge of the door with his elbow. 4 plates went. 2 broke cleanly on the service floor. 2 slid into the main room, one spinning across the polished wood and coming to rest near the base of a guest's chair. Owen froze. The crack of the plates had cut under the string trio's music and landed in a gap between pieces. A few heads turned. Cecile was already moving. She came through the pass-through with a cloth and a hand broom, knelt at the edge of the main room, and began gathering the pieces quietly. The guest whose chair had been nearest, a woman in silver, said it was nothing, didn't even scratch the floor, really. Please don't worry. It could have ended there, but Langford had seen it from across the room, and Langford had a particular feeling about the optics of disorder at his events. He crossed the floor with his champagne still in hand and stood over the scene. "What is this?" He said it the way people say things they do not actually want answered. Cecile looked up from the floor. "A plate slipped from the pass-through, sir. It's being cleaned up now, no damage to the floor or the guest. Langford looked at Owen, who had appeared in the doorway of the pass-through. He looked at Cecile kneeling on his floor. Then he looked at his guests and did the thing she had watched him practice all evening. He performed for them. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, and his voice carried the particular warmth of a man pretending to laugh off something that annoyed him. "This is why we hire carefully." He gestured at the floor. "I'd ask you to finish up and move to the back. You're in the sightline of my guests." She kept her hands moving. "I'll be out of your way in 30 seconds. His eyebrows came together. "Not 30 seconds. Now." He looked at her more carefully then, the way a person looks at something they've been ignoring when it speaks back to them. "What is your name?" "Cecile." "Facilities and Spurs for support." "Facilities." He let the word sit. "Is that what they're calling it this year?" He turned to the nearest guests with a smile that was no longer quite a smile. He said to the room, "We go to some lengths to make these evenings seamless. When they're not seamless, it matters who's in the room." He looked back at her. "I'm going to need you to take the rest of your evening somewhere else. You and the young man both." She stood. The cloth was folded in her hands. The plate did not fall because of him. "I was doing my job and I'd like to finish it." There was a pause. Someone in the room set down a glass very carefully. Langford smiled the way people smile when they have decided something. He said slowly, for the room to hear, "I think what's happened here is a misunderstanding about where the help belongs." He put the champagne glass on a passing tray, brushed his lapel once, and said, "You're done here tonight. Both of you. Leave the cloth. Leave the equipment. Someone from the catering company will sort it out." He looked past her. "Tom, please escort our facilities team out through the back." A large man in a dark suit came forward. Owen looked at Cecile. His face was the color of the white linen. Cecile set the cloth down on the tray stand. She straightened. She looked at Langford for exactly long enough, which was not very long at all. She said, "You should think carefully about what you're doing right now, Mr. Langford." The room went quieter than it had been. Langford's chin lifted. "Is that a threat?" She said nothing else. He said, almost gently, "Out." The string trio started up again, somewhere in the silence that followed. The sound was bright and slightly off. Tom walked Cecile and Owen through the service corridor and out the back entrance into a lane that smelled of wet pavement and exhaust. The fog had thickened. Across the lane, a restaurant exhaust fan ran its one steady note. Owen stood with his hands in his jacket pockets and did not know what to do with his face. "I'm really sorry," he said. "Don't be," she told him. "You didn't cause this, but they fired us both, and it was my tray." She looked down the lane for a moment. She said, "The tray was an excuse. Men like that don't need a real reason. They just need an audience." Owen's phone buzzed. He looked at it. His face changed. "There's a video," he said. One of the servers had her phone out. It got everything. He tilted the screen toward Cecile. She watched herself kneeling on the floor. She watched Langford stand over her, champagne in hand, telling a roomful of people that the help did not belong in their sightline. She watched him dismiss her in the tone a person uses when they want everyone listening to understand the distance between them. "Is that the whole thing?" she asked. Owen scrolled. "All of it," he said. "Right to when we left." She thought for a moment. Then she took out her own phone and called a number. The woman who answered was named Sylvia Tran. She was a corporate solicitor, the kind who kept her calendar clear on the principle that the most consequential calls come without warning. She picked up on the second ring. "Cecile, it's nearly 11. I know, I'm sorry." A pause. "You don't sound sorry. You sound like you made a decision." Cecile watched the fog move over the lane. "The closing is Monday?" Sylvia said yes. The institutional funds had signed. The family trust was prepared. Everything was ready and had been for 2 weeks. "Move it to Sunday," Cecile said. "First thing, and I need an emergency session called for Monday morning." Executive boardroom. Langford and the full board. A short silence. "What happened tonight?" "He let me go," she said. In front of 40 people with a microphone nearby and someone pointing a phone at him. Sylvia did not say anything for a moment. Then she said, carefully, "Cecile, You're about to own the company that just fired you. I know that. Who fired you? The man who has been running it for 10 years. She paused. I spent 4 months on that floor. I watched how this building works from the inside. Tonight I wore what it looks like when it fails. She put her hand flat against the brick of the building behind her. I've seen enough. Sylvia's keyboard began to sound in the background, light and efficient. All right, she said. Sunday morning. But their counsel won't love the timeline. Make it worth their while. You know what to offer. I'll have papers ready by 8, and Cecile. The board notice has to come from the new controlling party. The moment I file it, people will start asking who Meridian North is. Let them ask, Cecile said. They had 4 months to ask who I was. Not one of them did. She drove home through empty streets, the city quiet the way Vancouver gets after midnight when the rain has cleared, and the pavement reflects everything twice. On the passenger seat, a photograph in a plastic sleeve. Her father in a canvas jacket, standing outside a general store somewhere in the Salt, laughing at something off camera. She had never known what. The photo had been taken before she was born. Her mother had given it to her when she left for university, and said only he would have thought this was funny. She had thought about that a lot over the past 4 months. She looked at the photograph for a moment before she started the car. Then she started the car. Sunday morning. A law office above a bakery on West Hastings, 8:40 a.m. The smell of cardamom buns came up through the floorboards and mixed with the of fresh paper and printer toner. Cecile signed her name to 41 pages across 90 minutes. The Hartwick Family Trust. The Dunbar Pension Fund. A small institutional account she did not name aloud. When the last page was countersigned and the notary had finished, Sylvia set her pen down and looked across the table. 53%, she said, plus the secondary holdings. Effective today. Cecile looked out the window at the Sunday morning street below. Quiet, ordinary. A man walking a beagle. A woman unlocking a flower shop. It doesn't look like a boardroom, she said. Sylvia allowed herself a small smile. It will tomorrow. The board notice went out at noon. 7 members received the same message from a firm none of them recognized. Meridian North Capital, new majority stakeholder in the Sable Group, requests an emergency session. Monday, 8 a.m. executive boardroom, 42nd floor. Attendance required. Agenda, leadership review. By 1 o'clock, every board member's phone had called every other board member's phone. No one had heard of Meridian North. No one could find a name behind it. The family trust had been exploring a sale for 11 months, and the rumor had circulated without landing anywhere. Apparently it had landed. Bernard Osey read the notice on his back porch with his coffee going cold beside him. He read it twice. Then he thought about a woman kneeling on a floor, gathering broken plates with steady hands, and a man standing over her speaking to his guests. He set down his coffee. He thought, 8 o'clock cannot come quickly enough. Langford received the notice between rounds of golf. He read it, made a sound of mild irritation, and forwarded it to his assistant with a note. Activist fund, probably offshore, needs managing. He had dealt with this kind of thing before. New money liked to flex its share certificates. He would arrive Monday with his retention numbers and his development projections, and that would be the end of it. He fell asleep Sunday night without difficulty. Monday arrived gray and still. By 7:40, the 42nd floor smelled of coffee and careful conversation. Board members gathered near the windows and traded guesses in voices that stayed low. Bernard stood apart and watched the city. At 7:55, the elevator doors opened. A woman in a charcoal suit stepped out first, briefcase in hand, posture suggesting that she had already been waiting for this meeting before any of them had woken up. Behind her came a second woman, and it took several people in the room a moment to place her, the same moment it takes your eyes to adjust when a light you were not expecting comes on. Langford arrived at 7:58. He came through the boardroom door still talking, red folder under his arm, the ease of 10 years of Mondays preceding him. Let's make this efficient. He crossed toward the head of the table without looking up. I've got a 9:15 and a lunch." He looked up. The room was full and very still. 6 board members along the table. Bernard at the far end, hands folded. The woman in the charcoal suit standing at the head, documents squarely aligned in front of her. And in the chairman's chair, turned 3/4 toward the window, a woman whose face he finally recognized. Mr. Langford. The woman in the charcoal suit spoke first. "I'm Sylvia Tran, legal counsel for Meridian North Capital. Please take a seat." He did not take a seat. He looked at the chair. He looked at the face. "What is this?" He said it the same way he had said it at the restaurant. The way people say things they do not actually want answered. Sylvia opened her folder without hurry. As of 8:43 yesterday morning, Meridian North Capital completed the acquisition of 53% of the Sable Group. The Hartwick Family Trust, the Dunbar Pension Fund, and the Fenwick Institutional Account, all signed, all filed, all registered with the BC Registry as of this morning. She slid a single page down the length of the table. "With respect, Mr. Langford, this is not your boardroom anymore." His eyes went to the numbers, then to the signatures. His mouth opened and did not produce a sentence. He looked at the chair. The chair turned. Cecile Okafor settled her hands on the table and looked at him the way deep water looks at a stone that has just realized how far it has fallen. "Good morning, Mr. Langford. Please sit down. You look like you could use a moment." The red folder dropped from his hand and landed on the floor. For 4 seconds the room did not move. Then he laughed. A single note, bright and wrong, the way a fire alarm sounds like a mistake until you smell the smoke. "This is a stunt," he said. You were on the floor. You were cleaning." "I was," she said. "For 4 months. This is not possible. It took somewhat longer than that." "But yes, it is." He turned to the room. The 7 faces along the table. Not one of them offered him anything he recognized. She stood and walked the length of the table slowly. "You told 40 people on Thursday night that the help does not belong in the sightline of your guests." She stopped across from him. "I spent 4 months in that building to find out what you looked like when no one important was watching." She set a photograph on the table facing the room. Her father in his canvas jacket, laughing at something no one in this room would ever know. "I built Okafor Logistics from one leased truck and a freight contract that almost didn't renew. Sold it 4 years ago. My father drove supply routes across northern Ontario for 30 years. He believed that a company was only as honest as how it treated the people it never expected to see again." She looked at Langford. "Thursday night told me everything I needed to know about this one." Sylvia lifted a small device. The screen on the far wall lit up. The room watched 11 minutes of footage. A woman kneeling on a floor. A man standing over her, champagne in hand, explaining to a room of 40 that the help did not belong in their sightline. The careful, public dismissal. Owen's face in the service door. The walk out through the corridor. One board member looked away before the end. Bernard did not look away once. His jaw stayed set and his hands stayed folded and his eyes did not move from the screen. When it ended, Langford turned to the board. His voice found a register. "You've known me for 10 years. You've seen what this company has become under my leadership. This is clearly." He stopped because he saw their faces. He tried another door. He had always been good at finding the door that opened. "Look, Thursday was a bad night. Events like that, the pressure, the guests to manage. If I'd known who he heard it. Everyone heard it. The sentence hung in the room like a held breath. If I'd known who she was." Cecile nodded. Once, slowly. "There it is," she said. "That's the problem, Mr. Langford. You needed to know who I was to treat me like someone who warranted a thought." She touched the photograph on the table. "My father drove a truck for 30 years. No one in any boardroom ever knew his name. You don't have to imagine how he was treated. We just watched a version of it." Bernard rose. He held a printed document, the kind a man carries when he has read it more than once. "Miss Okafor," he said, "Section 9 of the Executive Conduct Agreement. The clause signed at the last renewal." He read it without hurry. "Any conduct in a public or semi-public setting that brings material reputational harm to the company its employees, or its stakeholders constitutes grounds for termination for cause. He set the document down. I was at that dinner. I watched you dismiss an employee on camera in front of 40 witnesses. He looked at Langford. I have been on this board for 7 years, and I have never used this clause. He paused. I've never had reason to. The retention folder was still on the floor where it had fallen. Langford looked at it. Cecile returned to the chairman's seat. She rested her hands on the table. Meridian North calls for a vote, she said, on the immediate termination of the chief executive for cause, effective today. She looked at him without raising her voice. You wanted the room to watch on Thursday. We'll do this the same way. He moved the way people move when they are out of doors and searching for the one that used to be theirs. He laughed again, but the laugh had nothing in it. Then came the pivot, smooth and late. Cecile. He used her name for the first time. This is clearly theater. We can talk about Thursday, I can. Whatever you need to hear about Thursday. I've run this company for 10 years. I've delivered for every person in this room. If I overreacted at the gala, I'll own that. I'll make it right. His voice found its old warmth. But you don't want to run a company on the basis of one bad evening. The room waited. She said, That's not what I'm doing. She let a moment pass. I'm running it on the basis of what that evening revealed. She looked at the faces along the table. That's what the next year is going to be about. Finding out what else it reveals. Sylvia called the vote. Bernard's hand went up first, then the woman beside him, then one by one, down the table. 5 hands, 6. The 7th, a man who had been Langford's closest ally on the board for 8 years, took the longest. Then his hand came up too. Diane noted each name. Unanimous, she said for the record. Termination for cause, under Section 9. All unvested performance shares and the current year bonus package are forfeit under the cause provision. Langford's hand was on the back of a chair. He had not sat down once. You can't. I'll sue. Every one of you. This is coordinated. This is... You're welcome to file, Sylvia said pleasantly. Discovery in that case would include the video, the termination record, and 5 years of personnel files we've been reviewing since yesterday morning. She paused. Please do sue. The math happened behind his eyes. Lawyers who have spent enough time with executives recognize the moment. It is very quiet and very fast, and it does not look like anything until it's finished. He picked up the red folder from the floor. He held it for a moment. Then he set it on the table, because it no longer had anything to do with him, and walked to the door. Tom Beaumont, his head of executive operations, who had stood near the wall through all of it, stepped forward when called. He placed his key card and his building pass on the table. He did not look at Langford on his way out. Whatever the arrangement between them had been, it had run its course. The 2 security staff who had always worked Langford's floor held the elevator for him. They did not speak. 39 floors, riding down. When the lobby doors opened, the morning shift was arriving. Cleaners with carts at the east corridor. The reception team, Frank at the guard desk, who looked up from his sign-in sheet and then looked at his desk. Word moves through a building the way weather moves through a valley, bottom first. Langford walked the full length of the marble lobby in a coat that no longer felt like his. He went through the revolving doors into a Tuesday morning that had not yet heard his name, and would not, after this week, much care about it. Upstairs, the boardroom found its air. Bernard crossed the room and shook Cecile's hand and held it a moment. He said, Your father, the supply routes. He drove for March and Freight, didn't he? Out of Sudbury. She looked at him. 40 years ago, I was a logistics clerk, he said. Your father saved a load of ours once. Bad weather crossing into Manitoba. No one asked him to stay with it. He stayed. He looked down at the photograph on the table. He had a good laugh. Cecile was quiet for a moment. She said, He thought most things were funnier than people gave them credit for. The city went on outside the glass, 39 floors below. The video reached the surface on Thursday. A local station ran 40 seconds of it. By Friday morning, the full 11 minutes were on every platform. By Friday night, the clip of a man in a tuxedo telling a woman on her knees where the help belonged had been watched 3 million times. The caption most people chose was quiet and exact. She was already the one in charge. National coverage came by the weekend. The charities named at the dinner reviewed their association with the gala. 2 of the 3 withdrew within a week. The donor cultivation dinners were quietly cancelled. The Sable Group released a statement in 4 sentences, signed by the new chair. It said what it needed to say and did not apologize for saying little. Journalists read it twice because it was so spare. Inside the building, Sylvia's team opened the personnel files. 5 years. Cecile's instruction was the same one she would give again, later, in other rooms. Follow everything. Her team worked through nights in a conference room that smelled of cold coffee and printer warmth. They found a pattern in 14 months of termination records. People who had raised concerns about overtime. A coordinator dismissed 3 weeks after filing a formal complaint. A woman in accounts let go 2 months before her full pension vested. A driver whose routes had been cut to part-time after he'd mentioned, once, that he thought the mileage reimbursements were calculated wrong. Names attached to restructuring decisions that had no structure behind them. 7 files. The same executive approval at the bottom of each. The 7 came forward over the following weeks. Some by email, some by phone, one in person. A woman who had been with the company for 11 years and sat in the boardroom visitor's chair with her hands in her lap and told her story in a voice that did not waver and did not rush. She had been waiting, she said, for someone to open the door. The company did not defend behind process. Cecile met 6 of the 7 in the same boardroom, the same chair, and opened each meeting the same way. The company owes you an apology, and the company pays what it owes. Owen, the 19-year-old from the gala night, received a phone call from Sylvia Tran 2 weeks after the dinner. His footage, supplemented by 2 other servers who had also recorded, had been licensed by 3 national outlets. The licensing proceeds belonged to the people who had taken them. The number was larger than a year of catering work. The note attached said, "You kept your hands steady when everyone else kept their eyes down. Sable would like to discuss whether you have plans for school." He did, as it happened. For Langford, the legal proceedings moved on 2 tracks. The 7 filed jointly. The evidence Hartwell had waived privilege on, because the company was no longer protecting the person who had written the memos. Made the discovery process brief and very uncomfortable for one side of the table. Tom Beaumont gave a sworn deposition that lasted 4 hours. He answered every question in a flat voice and named every instruction he had been given and the dates on which he had been given them. The court reporter's fingers moved through it like rain on a tin roof. It did not go to trial. 9 months after the dinner, Langford settled on conditions that were not sealed. A formal public apology recorded and released. Personal restitution to all 7. Repayment of the portion of charity funds that had not reached the designated recipients, and the auditors found that portion was considerable. A consent agreement barring him from executive or director positions in any publicly registered company for 12 years. His lawyers called it pragmatic. Everyone else called it what it was. The apology aired on a Wednesday. He sat alone at a plain table and read from a page his counsel had approved, word by word, in a voice that was neither the voice he used at galas nor the voice he used in boardrooms. He said, "I treated a person as less than my time because of what she was wearing and because I was not watching for anyone to be watching me. I was wrong. No occasion excuses it." His lawyers had written everything except the last sentence. Everyone who watched could tell. There was no prison sentence. What Langford lost was the thing that had always been more important to him than money. The rooms stopped having him at their center. The calls dropped off. The invitations that had once arrived without asking stopped arriving at all. He moved eventually to somewhere quieter, where the restaurant names were ones he'd never needed to know, and for the first time in a long time, he sat at tables where no one arranged themselves around him. Inside the Sable Group, things changed at the rate of something that had been wanting to change for a while. Drivers who had been shorted on overtime received full back payment with interest, 6 years retroactive. The 7 were offered reinstatement. 4 accepted, 3 chose their own paths, but accepted the compensation and the apology and the record being corrected. The coordinator, who had filed the formal complaint years ago and been let go for it 3 weeks later, was back in a role that now reported directly to operations. She had been offered her old job. She had said, politely, that she would prefer a better one. And the company picnic that summer was held at a rented property outside the city. Families of 800 employees. Children running across a lawn where, the previous autumn, 40 people in evening clothes had watched a man dismiss a woman for kneeling on a floor. Nobody checked anyone's bag at the gate. The catering team ate with everyone else. Bernard Ozzie, now lead director, gave a short speech at the start of the picnic. He talked about what a company looks like from the floor. He said that in 40 years on corporate boards, he had learned one thing reliably. A room that cannot see the people keeping it running will eventually run into something it didn't see coming. He looked around at 800 people eating in the late afternoon sun and said, "We're trying to be a room that sees everyone in it." He sat down to more applause than he had expected. There is a name for what happened at Sable now. The way things that become part of a place's history acquire names without being given them officially. New staff hear about it during their first week. No slides, no case study format. Someone who was there tells it, the way people tell things that were real. They describe the dinner. They describe the woman kneeling on the floor with her back straight, gathering pieces of broken plate with her hands, being told she did not belong in the sightline of the guests. They describe the Monday morning. And then they say, this company spent a long time not seeing the people in it. We are not going to do that again. You see something wrong, you say it to me. And if I don't move, you say it to her. The lobby had a change too. Small, the way the ones that matter usually are. On the wall of the service corridor, off the east hallway, at the spot where the maintenance office door met the marble, a framed photograph now hung at eye level. A man in a canvas jacket standing outside a general store somewhere in the Salle, laughing at something off to the side, something no one in the building had been there to hear. The plate underneath read, "For the ones who kept moving when no one was watching." Most mornings, if you came in early enough, you would find Cecile in the lobby. Charcoal suit, coffee from the place on Burrard, moving through the east corridor at a pace that suggested she had been there a while and was in no hurry to be anywhere else. The overnight guard Frank, who had been given a raise he did not know was coming and a note that said his years of service had not gone unnoticed, waved from his desk. The first time a new hire saw her, she turned to the person beside her and said, quietly, "Is that the chair?" Frank looked up from his sign-in sheet. He said, "That's the woman who built the company twice. Around here, those are the same job." The photograph in her pocket did not age. She had carried it in every jacket for 4 months, in a building that had never thought to ask who she was. She carried it still. Her father would have found this funny. She was becoming more certain of that all the time. I told this story for one reason. Tonight, somewhere in this country, a person in a uniform is being told where they belong by someone who has never once thought to ask who they are. And I need you to sit with that for a second. Because worth does not announce itself. It never has. So here is my question for you, and I want to know what you actually think. If you were Cecile, standing in that lane behind the restaurant in the fog, knowing what you know, knowing what Monday holds, do you make the call that night and move the timeline up? Or do you wait, let the video breathe, let them wonder for one more day, let the weight of it build? Drop your answer in the comments. Tell me your reasoning. I read them. And if this story landed somewhere, pass it on to someone who goes to work in a uniform and comes home tired in a way that people at desks don't always understand. A driver, a cleaner, a server. Someone who keeps things running that would fall apart without them. They deserve to know someone sees them. Subscribe and stay close because the next story drops here the same way this one did, without warning and with something to say. Until then, keep your back straight, keep moving, just like Cecile.